my pleasure to share this early afternoon on Friday with you, to share my views on EU enlargement, to say a few words whether we can treat the enlargement as a mechanism that would increase European stability or something contrary to that. I would try to emphasize slightly more academic line. It's a very simple reason. If I followed the bureaucratic line on the Friday afternoon with competition of the early afternoon nap, probably we'll all fall asleep. In that case, I will try somehow to be partly on your more academic line. But talking about enlargement, I think this is a structural factor of the whole European Union process. We all know that Europe was heavily burdened by the history and troubles, by conflicts and wars. And you can imagine it was particularly after First and Second World War in the first half of the 20th century, very heavy burden on the shoulders of politicians and statesmen of their time in Europe. They were under pressure to create conditions for something that would lead towards the lasting peace. In that sense, European Union, more or less, I think that we should look at through the perspective on glasses as the lasting peace project. Mm-hmm. In that sense, the many obstacles that we are facing today certainly are not on that level. There are many issues, many troubles. It's not always that European Union is a good weather union, sometimes bad weather union as well. But after every trouble that European Union faced throughout the last 6 decades, practically it's emerged stronger and more relevant at the global scale. But let's start with a story that you're very familiar. I mean, the European Union today still consists of 28 countries. You all know them. I mean, I just noticed that we need a blue pen to correct something on that map. But 28 countries means that the emphasis is on collaboration and cooperation. And that's something that international relations, since the end of the Second World War, become as a predominant factor. And it's not just the issue of European Union, but the principal policy of collaboration, of cooperation, as close as possible, becomes the crucial example and showcase to the rest of the world. But collaboration where? On the way how to bring the better services to the citizens. Not just how to provide the peace and stability, but citizens of Europe. This is something that should never be forgotten. That's the whole story why the European Union is based in that way. You will probably think, well, it's 20,000 kilometers from here. We are so far from European Union. And that's a kind of anecdote I would just to bring to your attention that European Union somehow, at least with the limited jurisdiction, is a little bit closer to New Zealand than you think. With French, with New Caledonia, or French Polynesia, I mean, you have some segments of European Union practically almost on rowing distance. You are all familiar with the process of EU enlargement. In 1951, when the treaty was signed, and finally the 6 founding countries established, something that today we see as the major political and economic bloc in the world. They start with those 6 countries, and then for the next 20 years, it was no any enlargement at all. Actually, UK tried, but it was rejected. In 1973, Denmark, Ireland, and the United Kingdom enlarged, extend, and it was more or less, let's say, the northern western way of extension European Union. And then with the democratic changes in southeast of Europe, in Greece, and then Portugal and Spain, they also practically met all criteria and joined Europe as well. In 81 Greece, and a few years later Portugal and Spain. And then we have the new phase when European Economic Community practically turned with the Maastricht Treaty to European Union. And in 1995, we had, let's say, Nordic extension of European Union with Austria, Finland, and Sweden. And then we came to the stage where I think that everybody would agree that European Union enlargement was a primarily political process. After the break of the Soviet Union, after practically democracy emerged in the eastern parts of Europe, previously influenced by Soviet Union, now European Commission, European Community as a whole, helped democratic transition of all those countries. And in 2004, we had really something that was called Big Bang approach of extending the European Union borders. And a few years later, Bulgaria and Romania, because they had a few problems, but they started exactly at the same time. And finally, 3 years ago, Croatia, as the new member state, joined the Union as well. I mean, somebody would say that it's for the 60 years, maybe it should be more. But if you look at the European Union, practically, still job to be done is to finalize the homeworks in the Southeast Europe, and then the project, at least, of Europe as a whole and free would more or less be done. We all talk about Brexit. I mean, this is something that is an unavoidable topic today, discussing about the European Union. But just a point of anecdote, actually, it's not the first divorce to happen. I mean, the first divorce from European Economic Community at the time was done by, guess what? I mean, if you see the total area, probably you will guess what we are talking about. It's Greenland. At that time was a part of Denmark. But with the increased home rules, practically they decided on referendum in '82 to leave European Union, or European Economic Community at that time. This was the first divorce. First divorce that certainly reduced the area of European Economic Area of that time for more than 2 million square kilometers. But on the other hand, a lesson learned from that process of going out, the process of negotiation for Greenland to leave European Union was almost 2 years. It just brings to your attention that if you're talking about the Brexit or any other country tomorrow, this is extremely complex process. And it's not just a one-off. Well, we will initiate Article 50, and then the very next day we would go out. For Greenland, the issue of negotiation and discussion was primarily, of course, fishery and whales. But they needed 2 years to negotiate the final divorce. But it's far more complicated a story related with how the European Union is attracted to the members. We had a situation with a country that applied, but were rejected. UK applied in 1961. Then was rejected because of the French veto. Spain in 1964. And finally Morocco, with independence they emerged. In Morocco in 1987, they applied, like any other European state, for European Union. But at that time, sadly or not, but it was rejected. But we have also applied, but withdrew. Denmark and Ireland in 1961. Once when the UK was rejected, Denmark and Ireland showed solidarity and said, okay, in that case we are not going in as well. I mean, it means it's far more complicated. We had Norway in 62, 67, set of referendums in Norway. They almost done the job. Practically the Norway is perfectly developed country. They met all criteria. For them it was relatively simple to join in. But it was the voice of the people. And finally, Switzerland in 1992, yes, indeed. Some of them applied, but then frozen their application. Iceland, they applied, but after 2 years, they frozen, withdrawn. And we have also decided to leave. I mean, certainly UK, we are all familiar, this is a topic of a day, but also we have Algeria. They decided to leave in 1962. And as we said, Greenland after Home Rule in 1985. And finally, we have the set of countries knocking at the door and trying to apply to join European Union. Mainly Turkey, Montenegro, Serbia, Macedonia, and Bosnia. It's southeast part of Europe. We certainly have to face a couple of questions. What are the benefits of the EU membership? What are the obligations coming from the membership? And finally, what are the alternatives? I think that you would agree if we say that the EU enlargement primarily has served as the anchor of stability, security, and peace in Europe for 60 years. In the life of the person, it's certainly a long period. In the life of the continent, not. But in comparison with what Europe experienced for centuries, by all means, this is an enormous achievement. For Southeastern Europe, after the break of the Soviet Union, European Union membership was kind of a driver, motivator of peaceful democratic changes. The same with South Europe, with Greece, Portugal, and Spain, but far before. Finally, driver of economic dynamism in Europe. I mean, if you establish bigger market, surely you play on the more important cards, negotiating with everyone beyond Europe. And this is exactly what we have today. It means a free single market of 500 million people. This is the best what we can imagine. And finally, the fact that we have, through the process of enlargement, more and more countries and more economic power as the unity, we have a far more stronger role in world affairs. European Union very easily could negotiate the free trade agreements. Now on agenda we have free trade agreements with New Zealand. Probably both countries would find a very easy win-win model. But you can imagine if, let's say, one single country, Slovakia or Croatia, is supposed to negotiate with, let's say, China or India or extremely big countries. I mean, it's hardly we could have a trade preferential agreement in the way as European Union could do it, as a strong economic bloc. And of course, it for Slovakia or Croatia or anyone else, it's marvelous to be part of that club. But when we are talking about the European Union, just have a few figures. 500 million people is European Union, certainly hard to compare with the big countries as China or India. But on the other hand, European Union has more people than the United States, for instance, and Russia together, plus 50 less Ukraine, let's say. When we come to the economic side, you can see that the size of economy, it's a GDP that European Union is at the moment the strongest economic bloc in the world. And this is something that we have to have in mind. And even when we're talking about the Brexit, think about it that certainly it's a very good, valid argument to believe that kind of economic cooperation between UK and the European Union would stay. I mean, nobody would risk such enormous economic and market potential.